Hey everybody, welcome, 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 welcome. Come on in, come on in. I've been catching up on all of the videos that I owed, all of the things that I need to catch up on. So this is my last one in this late hour, right? But this is how I have to do it when I have time, right? Um, so come on in, join me. Uh, I'm getting ready to just discuss, and really this is for everyone's benefit, um, our edification, our building, our education. I want to talk about some things, as I said before, that's happening in the Idaho Four murder case. This is something that nobody is really talking about, and we don't have any knowledge of the four autopsies yet. But again, if a trial happens, then that will definitely be introduced as evidence at the trial. And I want to talk about it. I want to talk about it before it comes up because those are specific things that we can learn that will help us put some things together. So, the number one thing is, was there more than one knife used? We want to know that. We want to know if potentially there were multiple knives, and that may equate to more than one assailant, right? So that's something we need to think about, we need to consider. Um, we want to see the comparing of wounds from one victim to another. Sometimes, because of the number of stabbings, I'm not sure exactly what the approach was in the autopsy, but sometimes if you're able to take pictures, if the medical examiner comes to the scene, there can be some measurements made to see potentially how tall was the person. Because you have so many victims, if one of the victims was standing up, one of the victims was laying down, we know there was some potential for the stabbings to happen in the bed, possibly somebody standing up. You can gain knowledge and try to get a approximation of height. And that's important, right? Because they have someone on trial, an assailant that's 5'3" versus 5'10. That's a big difference in height. Or 6'5", that's a big difference. So that's something that's very important that we want to see potentially the height or approximate height of the suspect. Um, Something also, um, because there were multiple stabbings, um, this could indicate a couple of things: rage, anger. Sometimes when you see multiple stabbings, you could think that maybe that person is connected to the victim, or they may not know the victim at all. Um, Sometimes you can try to make a connection. Well, if one person is stabbed significantly more than others, were they potentially the target? Or it could be something of, did they give the most fighting? Or they have defensive wounds. But that could also be the difference in this case where you have three females and one male victim. So it's so much to learn from the autopsy that I want to unpack it. I want to talk about what we can look forward to if this goes to trial. And the autopsies are brought in as evidence, which they usually are. They're usually referred to, they provide a lot of detail, and it can help us, right? It can help us in the case. So I posted on the Hidden Horror Facebook page three separate articles. You can check them out. The forensic one is the one that has the most value, in my opinion. So I want you to check that one out. But there's three in total, and we're going to go over all three. So the first one is from www.americanoutdoor.guide. It's dated July 7th, 2017. It's written by ASG staff, and it's titled Knife Attacks, What You Should Know. Attacked combatives training, prepping, security, survival, self-defense, survival situations, and survival skills. So I guess that's kind of like what this is going to fall under. A lot of people are encouraged, and I even encourage you to take a self-defense class. If you don't want to take a self-defense class, you don't think you're going to get a lot out of it, enroll in karate. It's not extremely expensive. You might like the physical exercise, but you really learn how to defend yourself, protect yourself, and especially if you're having an encounter or an attack. It's some ways and things that you can do to keep you safe, to keep your physical body safe, right? Creating distance, blocking, different strategies, or if you do have to respond in a physical way, they can demonstrate to you the best ways to do that to keep yourself safe. So this is what this article is probably going to cover a little bit of that. So let's get started, right? So there are realities about knife attacks that you may not pick up from a dojo, training program, or martial arts expert. You may stumble upon some credible videos and instructional articles online, but nothing will ever accurately describe or predict what it's like to face someone who has no qualms about stabbing or cutting you. Though it's true that experience is the best teacher, we don't recommend you go out of your way to fight someone with a knife. It's always best to avoid this, but it's still worth knowing how to escape or defend against a knife attack if it ever happens. In this short guide, we start by debunking a few myths about knife attacks. Now, the reason I'm kicking it off with this article, and I'm going to put the forensic article at the end, is because the forensic article has a lot of medical terminology. So I don't want you to just click off the video so fast without getting some tips, getting some advice, and also even some knowledge at the end, right? Some medical knowledge, some things that we can look for in the autopsy. So this is also always bringing in some safety aspects, right? To keep you safe, things that you can do in your life right now. And then we're going to mirror it. Remember, we're going to mirror it back to the community. We're going to talk about what happened with the Idaho Four and what potentially could be in those autopsies. So we're going to bring it full circle for you. And just if you didn't read right here, there is a little warning because when we get through some of this, but specifically some of the medical stuff at the end, we start talking about the forensic autopsy. If you can't handle certain conversations, you're always free to click off. You can read these articles for yourself if you're not able to handle listening to someone talk about these graphic subjects, because this is a little graphic, okay? So let's continue on. The first headline is never a duel. Picture this: a guy challenges you to a knife fight. You bring out your knife, he has his. You both try to cut each other. The first to draw blood wins. Great. Now forget that romantic notion of how a knife attack happens. It ain't happening like that, baby. No. And take note, it's usually a knife attack and hardly ever a knife fight or duel. Correct. So that means that the person, they're having the intent to attack you. They're carrying a weapon, they're carrying a sharp blade, and they're ready to use it. It's probably going to be concealed, so you probably don't see it, and you may not even know they have it on them. And they pull it out, and they're going to attack you quickly. So this is why we're talking about this, okay? In reality, you rarely see a knife-wielding attacker coming. Knives are very easy to conceal, and some are even made of non-metallic materials like reinforced plastic, ceramic, fiberglass, or titanium. So not to set off metal detectors. This is why you won't see a knife or realize you're a victim of a knife attack until the very last second. You may even get cut or stabbed before you realize what's happening to you. Okay? So you could be in an argument, you could be arguing with a person, you could have a confrontation, and before you've even realized it, the person has already pulled out the knife and cut you and you don't even know it. So it's very dangerous. I always recommend, I go back to when I was in middle school, they taught conflict resolution. It is much safer, it's much smarter to walk away, to separate yourself. If you're in a disagreement, if you're having a problem with the person and the person wants to immediately go to anger, immediately go to violence, get out of there, walk away. More than likely, they're concealing a weapon. Typically and usually it's a knife, and they're going to use it on you. Get out of there. If you feel like it's escalating, if you feel like the person is off, or you've been kind of noticing some strange behavior, get out of there. Let it be that you walk away whole, alive, and safe before it escalates into violence. A knife attack can come from nowhere. And you don't see it, because you never know. I always try to tell you guys, you never know what another person is thinking, what they're willing to do. If they feel threatened, if they feel like, oh my goodness, this could happen to me. You can't control how another person feels, and it can happen so quickly to the point where most people, they're not even aware that they've been stabbed. And they've already been stabbed. They don't even feel it. When your adrenaline is pumping, sometimes you don't even know. So again, walk away. Don't let the situation escalate. Okay. So the next headline, never underestimate any knife attack. It doesn't matter if someone fillets wildly at you with a knife. Even an inexperienced and clumsy attacker can take you down with one lucky strike. Also, an attacker who's drunk or on drugs can be just as deadly as a sober professional. Treat all attackers as serious threats. Don't even let it get that far. Please walk away. Get in your car, get in another person's car, call an Uber, walk, catch the bus, get away, get out of town, because once that attack happens, it can be very lethal. Okay, let's go to the next headline. Is savage before it's lethal. It takes a special kind of person to want to knife an innocent human being. Let me say that again. It takes a special kind of person to want to knife an innocent human being, the brutal kind. Unless they're professionals who want to end the fight and you quickly, a knife wielder may make several stabs or cuts on his victim and then leave them to bleed to death. You can find graphic videos of knife attacks online where the attacker employs the sewing machine style of repeatedly stabbing their victim from different angles and on different parts of the body. Another aspect of a savage knife attack is that you can be ganged up on by more than one attacker. Remember that your attacker won't fight fair. And this is partly my concern in the Idaho Four, because there were two victims on the second floor and two victims on the third floor. I always wondered if there were two attackers because it's kind of difficult to hold one person down while the other person may be moving because there's two people and you're trying to stab them both. I always feel like maybe it was two people, one person that could just hold them down and the other person stab. I don't know. That's why I need to know if there's two knives, two different knives. I don't know. Just even the position of the bodies makes me wonder. I don't know. I don't know if it started and they were standing up and then they got placed in the bed, or if they walked in, they were already in the bed and the attack began. We just don't know. But I wonder about that. Was there two people in the Idaho Four Murders attacking the students since it was two in each on each floor? Okay. The next heading: It's hardly ever one cut. This is so true. A knife wielding attack rarely slashes or stabs their victims only once. For maximum lethal effect, they will aim to make several cuts or stabs or combinations of either. Attackers may even punch or kick in combination to immobilize their victims. Knife wielders who have studied human anatomy will also know which body parts to target. The legs are targeted due to their size, and victims with the leg wounds tend to bleed out faster. The abdominal area is another favorite since it's an easy and large target with a good chance of puncturing organs like the intestines, stomachs, liver, and spleen. The neck slash throat areas are also preferred targets. By cutting the neck or throat, the victim can quickly die of blood and or oxygen loss, depending on the location and severity of the cut. Knife attacks are nothing like in the movies where the guy with the knife slashes or stabs a victim once, then leaves. If you want to see a movie with a more realistic depiction of a real knife attack, grab a copy of American Me. Somebody else recently recommended this movie, American Me. I haven't watched it yet, but I'm thinking about watching it. I think it's centered around prison, so those are not the type of movies that I enjoy. Excuse me, but I'm thinking about it. Anyway, the next headline: They'll take any cut. Anyone who comes at you with a knife will not hesitate to cut any part of you. They will gladly cut targets of opportunity like your face, hands, or arms. The more cuts you get, the more you believe, and the longer you hang around, the better chances of unaliving you. Next headline: Cuts can seem worse than they are. Shallow cuts or punctures on your knuckles, arms, or fingers can result in a lot of bleeding. If you're squeamish at the sight of blood, especially yours, then you're more susceptible to going into shock after a few seconds. If you do get cut, do not panic. Dying from blood loss or infection takes time, and the cuts or stabs you sustain are only serious if they hit a major blood vessel. How to defend yourself. Using or defending against a knife is messy, but not impossible. The first thing you need to know is that avoidance is the best defense. Here are a few tips. Situational awareness is your first line of defense. When in an unfamiliar area, don't walk in secluded areas, especially if you're alone. If you even suspect you're about to be attacked, run. Put as much distance and obstacles between you and your attacker. If there are other people around, remember there's safety in numbers. Make noise to attract attention, while simultaneously running from the attacker. There are cases where running away isn't an option. If you are cornered or forced to stand your ground, you need to do these things. Learn about defanging the snake or disarming your attacker, but don't try to do so without some training. You can use a jacket, belt, or scarf to blunt or cover the blade. If you're quick enough and your timing is right, you can trap the attacker's knife, binding or wrapping it up with your jacket, belt, or scarf. Practice this first with a sparring partner to learn how to avoid getting cut. A lot of people get cut. I'm sorry, but a lot of people get cut and they have defensive wounds on their hands, their arms. Okay, if you don't have a weapon handy like a can of mace, a stun gun, or a taser, tactical pen, or a knife of your own, arm yourself with what you can find. A stick, a broken bottle, a metal pipe, or rock will do. Anything with enough heft and weight to fend off your opponent or at least make them hesitate. Do your best not to panic. It's natural for your body to freeze up or hyperventilate. Realize this is part of your body's defense mechanism, the fight or flight response, and it can be controlled. If you're cornered and have nowhere to run, fight to survive, not to win. Be mindful that your goal is to get out alive. As soon as your opponent is incapacitated, take the opportunity to escape. Attackers, especially criminals, prefer to fight anyone who wants to stay and fight, not anyone who wants to run. Victims desperate to run are more unpredictable and dangerous than those who choose to stay and fight. Accept the possibility that you will get cut. That way, if and when it happens, you don't lose your wits about you or freeze up and go into shock. Train and learn as much as you can about dealing with a knife wielding attacker in a controlled environment like a dojo. It's also worth listening to people who have experience in knife attacks, like police officers, professional bodyguards, or even club bouncers. Um, they have this whole thing on defanging the snake. Um, you can read that if you want to. I'm not that. Um, I think that's good enough. Let's go to our second article. Okay. It's titled, Why Would Someone Attack You with a Knife? It's on www.bostonkrabmaga.com. The author is Gershon Ben Karen, and it's not dated. It's on his page. He's just giving out some information about why he thinks somebody would attack you with a knife, okay? So let's read. Why would someone or somebody attack you with a knife? An attack is very different to a threat in that the person attacking you wants to cause you harm rather than get you to acquiesce to a demand, such as handing over your wallet, etc. So, why would somebody want to stab or slash you? Most of the time, when practicing defenses against knife attacks, we don't consider or think about the attacker's motives. We just practice the technique because if we were to be attacked, the assailant's motive wouldn't be relevant. We just be forced to defend ourselves. In the moment, I agree that understanding motive isn't the most important concern. Blocking the knife and nullifying the attacker attack jump to the top of the queue. However, when we train knife attacks, we should think about the motive of the attacker because it may give us a better understanding of how real life attacks occur, the context of such attacks, and whether the training scenarios we create in our drill are realistic. If somebody decides to attack you with a knife, there must be a reason. It doesn't have to be a good reason, but there has to be one. If you look at the people in your life, friends, family members, associates, work colleagues, people you know, etc., do any of them have a reason to attack? Not threaten, but attack you with a knife. If you're an adult interacting with other adults, the answer is probably no. Most of us are not engaged in serious or in important enough disputes, either in real life or on social media, that someone would think about attacking us with a knife. This doesn't mean that it's not possible or doesn't won't happen, just that it's a big step for someone to take. Most people have too much to lose and not enough to gain from engaging in such acts of extreme violence. A teenager's reality may be different to this, and they may be at risk from peers who do feel slighted and disrespected by things that are said and written about them, and feel justified to cause harm with a knife, etc. But once the ego of youth is left behind, most of us understand the seriousness of attacking somebody with a blade. So, in what situations might you face a knife attack? There are several scenarios in which you may end up dealing with a knife attack. One obvious one would be when you get into a disagreement, argument with somebody who ends up pulling a knife at some point during the confrontation. It may be at the beginning, but it could also be in the middle of the fight. In either case, the knife has to be drawn. The fight doesn't start with it out. This is why training to spoil a draw from a multitude of positions should be a key part of our training. We should also train against an assailant who is attempting to intimidate us with a knife rather than simply attack us, etc. There are those individuals who carry a knife because they are scared of confrontations but have the type of ego that gets them involved in them. These individuals will often display a knife in the hope of getting the person they are dealing with to back off, not realizing that once drawn, their ego will not let them put it away without using it. This is why scenario based training is so important, as it allows us to recreate these social interactions so that we have the proper context for our training. Students can practice having an argument where a knife gets drawn at some point. Unfortunately, most training involves knives focuses on the knife being out and on the attack, often with good distance between the attacker and their target. If you drill from the position of two individuals arguing and talking, you will get to train at the correct range and distance for these types of assault. The individual pulling the knife at the beginning of the fight to intimidate you may not have a motive to kill you. However, that may change as the fight progresses. They may have initially drawn to intimidate you and dissuade you from getting physical with them, and then made a few slashes to try to injure you. But as you keep defending yourself and attacking them back, they start to realize the pressure they are under, and their own survival instinct takes over. They will move to an emotional place and start to make stabbing actions. This is when they have emotionally crossed over into kill mode, and they have one goal, which is to put you out of commission. This is one way in which somebody who only ever thought about using their knife for self defense ends up using it to unalive someone. Knife attacks are also committed by predatory individuals, usually in pairs or groups, who are actively or tacitly looking for victims so that they can feel good about themselves and gain some respect from each other. Often, their attacks are used to display to the others in the group that they are tough and not to be messed with. These attacks may be preceded by some form of dialogue, or they may be conducted more as an ambush, with the initial assailant moving in close to the target slash victim before grabbing and repeatedly stabbing them. They may decide not to approach their target head on, where eye contact could be made and the victim could engage them in dialogue, but instead approach or silly up at an oblique angle, which makes it difficult for the target to identify if the attacker's movement is related to their own. In any case, they will probably try to control them with their non-weapon hand, either grabbing the head to pull them in, pushing and pulling them with a lapel grab, or driving them back with the forearm against the throat, etc. However, they try to control, latch on to their victim, they will be trying to move them and disrupt their balance. This may mean that the only initial defense that can be made is to block, defend yourself as you try to get stable. There are many ways to do this, but until you do, striking in or getting control of the weapon arm will be largely ineffective. Knife attacks are dynamic, frenzied affairs that involve movement and will often see you taken by surprise. This is why it is so important to understand and be able to identify the pre violence indicators so that you can exit a situation or, at worst, prepare for it before the initial attack is made. A big question, though, is how often do we train knife against multiple assailants? Situations can change. What started out as a simple mugging scenario where a knife was used to threaten and force a target to hand over their possessions can change to an attack when they refuse or if they try to resist. Excuse me. A mugger with a knife is not simply going to walk away. If you resist or refuse to hand over your wallet, they will use their weapon against you. It's as simple as that. This is why it's always best to comply with a demand for resources. If, after complying, the mugger hasn't walked away, they're no longer behaving like a mugger, and you are dealing with a different motive. This is where you need to go on the offensive and defend yourself. It is worth noting that anytime you attempt a physical solution to a knife threat, you have immediately elevated the situation to a knife attack, as the mugger will now be forced to use the knife to defend themselves with. Knife attacks don't just happen in a vacuum. They happen in a variety of situations with different situational components. If we only trained against an attacker who shows you a weapon and comes to you from distance, we're not training for reality. We need to think about why somebody would attack us, and because of this why, what their attack would actually look like. Great read, right? Amazing. Last article. This is the big one. This is the one that's really going to be what we're looking for the autopsy results for the four Idaho 4 victims. So we're going to talk about it now. Let's get started. Again, this is a warning. If you're not able to handle graphic material, you can read it possibly, or just click off now because it's about to get very, very graphic. Now, this is on emedicine.medscape.com. It's dated December 22nd, 2022. It's titled Forensic Autopsy of Sharp Force Injuries, and the author is Joseph A. Paulo. He's the chief medical doctor, okay? Let's get into it. This is the overview. Injuries produced by pointed objects or objects with sharp edges are referred to as sharp force injuries. Sharp force injuries are characterized by a relatively well-defined traumatic separation of tissues occurring when a sharp edge or pointed object comes into contact with the skin and underlying tissues. Three specific subtypes of sharp force injuries exist as follows: stab wounds, incise wounds, and chop wounds. History. Along with other primitive injury types such as blunt force trauma, drowning, thermal injury, and other environmentally induced forms of injury, sharp force injuries have been around for a long time. Numerous accounts of deaths due to sharp force trauma are documented in the Old Testament of the Bible as follows. When Phinehas saw this, he left the assembly, took a spear in his hand, and followed the Israelite into the tent. He drove the spear through both of them, through the Israelite and into the woman's body. Numbers chapter 25, verses 7 through 8. Here's another one. But Jaleel, Heber's wife, picked up a tent peg and a hammer and went quietly to him while he lay fast asleep, exhausted. She drove the peg through his temple into the ground and he died. That was Judges chapter 4, verse 21. Even with the advent of more modern injury types such as gunshot wounds, motor vehicle collisions, medical therapy related incidents, and injury related to alternating current electricity, sharp force injuries have remained relatively common within the world of death investigation. In fact, as society has become more modern, a variety of new, more advanced sharp force injury types have emerged. In this chapter, we will discuss sharp force injuries and the deaths that result from such injuries. Epidemiology. Deaths due to sharp force injuries are less common than those due to blunt trauma, gunshot wounds, asphyxial mechanisms, and drug toxicity. The frequency of such deaths varies from one jurisdiction to another. The most common manner of death associated with sharp force trauma is homicide, followed by suicide. Accidental sharp force injury fatalities do occur but are relatively rare. A study performed at an urban medical trauma center evaluated the trauma deaths that passed through the emergency department during a 11-year period from 1994 to 2005. Sharp force stab wounds accounted for 11% of the cases, compared with gunshot wounds 50%, 56%, falls 11%, motor vehicle collisions 9%, assault 7%, and struck pedestrians 4%. A report by the Centers for the Disease Control evaluated violent deaths occurring in 39 states, the District of Columbia, and Puerto Rico during the year 2018. In the report, a violent death is defined as a death resulting from the intentional use of physical force of power against oneself, another person, or a group or community. Sharp force injuries accounted for 1.9% of all suicides, compared with the top three means of suicides: firearms, 48.2%, hanging slash strangulation slash suffocation, 29.5%, and poisoning, 12.4%. Sharp force injuries accounted for 10.6% of all homicides, compared with 71.5% for firearms and 4.2% for blood trauma. Overview of the entity. As mentioned above, the term sharp force injury encompasses essentially three separate but related injury types. Stab or puncture wounds are produced by sharp, pointed objects wherein the direction of force is more perpendicular to the skin surface as opposed to tangential or parallel. In most instances, the wound is deeper than it is long on the skin surface. In contrast, incised or cut wounds are produced by sharp-edged objects wherein the direction of force is more tangential or parallel to the skin surface as opposed to perpendicular. In most circumstances, the wound is longer on the skin surface than it is deep. Chop wounds can be considered a combination of sharp and blunt force trauma wherein a relatively bulky object with an edge or a fast moving object with an edge impacts the body, resulting in injuries that have features of sharp force trauma as well as those of blunt force trauma. Indications for the procedure. Shock force injuries fall under the jurisdiction of the medical examiner or coroner. Although not as common as firearms related injuries, these injuries are often seen in suicides and homicides. Sharp force injuries are also encountered in the setting of multiple injuries related to motor vehicle accidents. Detailed examinations of sharp force injuries, particularly in homicides, can prove useful information regarding the type of weapon that likely inflicted the wounds. This information can potentially guide the police to the recovery of a murder weapon, or it can be used to exclude other implements recovered from a crime scene. So I just wanted to kind of bring up the sharp force injuries. There are some explicit videos that actually show different types of wounds. I did not want to bring that forth. Um, I still want to consider the victims' families and be sensitive to them. Um, I am hoping and praying that um, the medical examiner or the forensic pathologist, whomever completed the autopsies, I am praying that they did a very thorough job. That means for me that they were able to take pictures at the crime scene at 1122 King Road, video um, with the victims still in the spaces, in the rooms, in position as they were. Um, I am praying that when they performed the autopsy, they were doing um, video and pictures because they need to measure the the width of the wounds. They need to know how deep the stabbings for each one of the wounds were. They need to count how many stabbings for each victim. Um, it's an order that they should be following. They would do um, layout to demonstrate the different areas where the wounds are. So much they can uncover from the autopsy. So I am hoping that that piece of the autopsy was done by the medical examiner or the forensic pathologist. Another part of the autopsy I'm hoping that they did was the toxicology screen. There's been so much information going back and forth about 1122 King Road possibly being a drug house, possibly having drugs sold allegedly there. So in the toxicology screen, they can learn a lot about any type of medications that were in the body, any drugs were in the body. Um, they can see any levels, right? So that's something, hopefully, that was done. I would also like to know for the food delivery, was the food consumed by either Ethan or Zaina? And if so, was it processed in the body and how long? Now, this may be difficult because there was such a stretch in time from when the medical examiner actually came. She said she waited about 5.5 hours after the 911 call. So that would be approximately 5 p.m., 5:30 p.m. So hopefully that information will still be accurate. And that's also the other two roommates on the third floor. Was there any food processed in their stomach? Was because that can help us with the time of death, right? Because that had changed. So we're trying to kind of zero in on the time of death. So that's very important. And um, if we can see if any food was processed and we can find out when was the last time they ate, that would help us to figure out a time of death for the victim. So that's also very important. For the four victims, allegedly two had defensive wounds. Now we don't know the details, but again, the autopsy should detail all of this. Where are the defensive wounds? Are they typically on the hand, on the fingers, on the arms? And that's for trying to block someone trying to come down with the knife. Again, we're looking to try to figure out what's the assailant's height. Was there more than one assailant? Was there different heights? Was there different knives? And that's when you compare wounds to wounds. There's so much we can get from the autopsy and the toxicology screen. So that's what this video was for, is to give us additional insight. We know that these were 4 homicides. So hopefully they took a lot of time in going through and showing us where the wounds are. Again, it's important that we know how many stabbings each victim had, where they're located, the sizing, the depth. Was someone receiving more wounds than others? If there were defensive wounds on the victims, which victims, where were they at? All of that is going to help put a picture together of what happened, how it happened. Was there anyone possibly targeted? If the roommates were asleep, typically if you are asleep during a knife attack, you typically will not get up. You will not get out of the bed because you don't really have the ability. Once the stabbing has started and you begin to bleed out, most people that are asleep are not waking up and fighting back. So this will help us to determine, were the victims sleeping? Were they in the bed or were they up? Where were they? Where was the bodies found? Was the bodies found in the bed? Was the bodies found on the floor? Was there a blood trail? If so, where? It would also indicate to us if you're standing up and you're stabbed, you usually will have the knife will go up. Well, I'm sorry, the knife will come down first, and when the knife is taken out, it will spray. It will come out, but it will cast off the blood. The blood will cast off the knife and spray. So do we see a spraying on the wall or not? And if so, is that up high, so that indicate that someone was standing up in at one level, or was the person laying down? So you're really not going to have the same height in the cast off because the person is down in the bed and you're at a lower height. So that's kind of how we can figure out where the victims were when the knife attack began, and potentially it kind of helps us also possibly to determine the height of the assailant, or if there were more than one assailant, the heights of the assailants. though. That's another big piece. And again, we don't know about the autopsy report. We don't know how much evidence was documented. Was there pictures taken? Sometimes people will run yarn or something to demonstrate where a person was at the time of the attack. Um, Now, that helps with gunshots, but with the knife attack, it just depends. It depends on a lot of things. You have to read that scene. You have to see where those bodies were, where the victims were, where was the blood splatter. Um, we know that in Zaina's bedroom, there was leakage of blood outside. So we know at some point um, the blood that was draining from the body, it was so much that it ended up leaking outside of the home. So that tells me that there was some extensive stabbings, maybe a major blood vessel, and the person bled out, and there was a large amount of blood. Um, Again, I'm hoping that police did an excellent job, that they collected evidence, they took pictures, um, that they took video, and they're able to kind of reconstruct what happened, the events and the order of the attacks. Um, you know, into a room, if two people are in the bed, that would be different from if one person was attacked at the entryway or in the room, standing up, and then the other person is attacked in the bed. That make you feel that could be more than one attacker, or how did that happen? Was there a fight? Was there a battle? Was there a struggle? If one person's standing up and the other person's in bed, the second person get out of the bed? Well, we already can see that from the mattress, it appears that possibly Ethan allegedly was laying in the bed, and that's when he received the stabbing. So, where was Zaina in the room? Was Zaina stabbed first? Um, was there two people? Was there two people, one person holding somebody down? Possibly, we just have no idea. But again, we look at the crime scene, we look at the pictures, the video, and determine who was alive, who was woke. Excuse me, not alive, but who was woke at the time of the attack. All of that can play into figuring out the order of the deaths and how the attack unfolded. Um, it's kind of hard to tell. I know from reading the PCA, uh, there is some acknowledgement of hearing crying and things like that. So, did they hear any other voices? Did they hear Ethan's voice? Did they hear the other girls' voices on the third floor? Um, did they hear any fighting from the third floor? If the third floor is above you, you're on the second floor and the third floor is above you. Did you hear any rumblings? Did you hear anything fall to the ground? Or did you hear Murphy barking, barking, barking? It's just so many things that you can kind of pull together from the autopsy report, the toxicology report. Were they drinking? Was there any drug use? Were they inebriated? Um, just trying to put it together in a way that when it goes to court and there's testimony behind it, it can help explain and demonstrate the theory of what they believe happened, the order of what they believe happened in the case. So the autopsy is very, very important. Um, the toxicology screen can be very, very useful. Um, so those are two pieces of evidence that I'm sure the prosecutor has turned that over, and the defense, and they both have the ability to have their own experts, review it, examine it, have an expert review it, have another medical examiner review it. I'm not sure. I think most of the victims were cremated, so you can't go back and do another autopsy. You would have to rely on the pictures, the video, the autopsy that was conducted. Now you can have experts review pictures and everything, and kind of make their own assessment. Um, hopefully, excuse me. Hopefully, in this case, all of the victims' blood was retained, that they kept some samples for testing for later on. So hopefully, they took great pictures, great measurements, very detailed reports, and took some vials of blood that would be stored so they could be tested, and, see what results come back for that. So, yeah. So hopefully, it will help tell the story of what happened to the victims in this case. So hopefully, this conversation just about attack and what can happen with these sharp force injuries is helpful to you. It help you kind of think about the upcoming case and what potentially will be put on as evidence, what will be said in the autopsy and the toxicology report, um, and we can take this, apply it to the case, and see what happened. Um, we don't have a date for the trial yet, but these are things we need to be thinking about. I'm very interested to know what's in that autopsy. I like to review it and read it, and when the trial starts, I'm definitely going to take a look at it and see if there's anything that's standing out, or especially the toxicology screen, because I would like to know if there were any drugs in the system of any of the victims, or medications. Sometimes medications can have an effect. If I take cold medicine, like NyQuil, I'm going to sleep, for a longer period of time because it puts me to sleep. So things like that all kind of play into maybe why a person was asleep, or didn't get up, or didn't wake up, or was not able to respond to the attack because they may have been drinking, or possibly, allegedly, I don't know. Um, Multiple drinks, I don't know. But all of that could play into how you respond, especially if you're being attacked at a early morning hour where technically, most likely, a person would be sleeping. So you have to look at all of that. You have to consider all of that, look at all of that, and um, try to put things together in a way that will help explain the story in detail. What happened to the victim, the order in which it happened, um, even the trail of blood. Did it lead from the third floor down, or was St. Ethan's blood possibly going up? Was their blood found in the other person's room for the victim? So that can help us understand the order of the attack. Most people, I think, now believe the attack started on the third floor and came down to the second floor. Honestly, we don't know. Um, People think that because of the way the PCA discloses, um, the roommate on the second floor allegedly having her own things and picking out the door, and then saying that the um, person walked past them. Um, and the timing of that, I guess there's not room for that person to go upstairs and then have the attack on um, Kaylee and Maddie, and then come back down. So a lot of people believe the attack started on the third floor. And they also say, well, if the intended target, for example, was Zaina, why go to the third floor? So we don't know about if there was a target or not, but why go to the third floor if you started on the second floor? You have to kind of know that there was a third floor, um, or did it start on the third floor and come to the second floor? I think a lot of people believe that now. But could the blood trail possibly show that, demonstrate that? And the samples of blood, did you take samples, of different areas of the room to see if there was some overlapping of blood from some of the victims on the third floor with the second floor, the second floor with the third floor. And then even the layering of the blood, that can indicate who was attacked first. Was one person's blood under another person's blood? And then that may demonstrate who was attacked first. So there's so many things that you can get from the autopsy, and with excellent detective work, hopefully that happened right. We're praying that they did an excellent job and that we can use that, take that information and apply it to the case, and it can help explain what they believe happened. Yeah, that's it. And they kind of gave a lot of great tips as far as what to do in a knife attack. But I will say this to you, because it can produce so many injuries and potentially be deadly. If you feel that something is going left and it's escalating, get out of there, escape, get away. Everything you can, all your efforts, get out of there. Get out of there before it escalates any further into a knife attack. Because that's something that you're not going to see, that's probably concealed. And if it starts, you may not even feel it initially, okay? So take that piece of advice, share it, and, get out of there. Get out of there. Don't want anything like that happening to you. So I want you to stay smart, stay safe, stay savvy, be well, all of my friends. I will see you soon in another video. I still have part 4. We're on page 20, part 6 of the Cassie Ventura versus Sean Combs lawsuit. We're on page 20 now, okay? Part 6. So we're getting closer to 35 pages and maybe 1 or 2 more parts to wrap it up. Okay, so thank you again for checking out this video, spending this time with me. Be well, okay? Be well, all my friends. Have a beautiful, beautiful day, okay? Bye, everybody.